Welcome back to Talking Points. And we last left off with a highly interesting situation that we find ourselves in with regard to the Commissioner of Police. But there's another interesting situation that we find ourselves in, and that is with regards to the education system and how the opening of schools has more or less, well, has it worked so far? Has it not worked? It really depends on who you ask at this point. There seems to be a lot of issues with regards to the reopening of schools. We do have to wonder to what extent were these anticipated? Will they be worked out? Now, to have that conversation, it might be a little bit focused. Dr. Faith Bertrell is here with us, and I'm happy to have this conversation with her because we haven't necessarily heard on any specifics on the matter. I'm curious with regards to Tobago because Tobago would have its own unique challenges. That's not necessarily to say that what's going on in Tobago is not what's going on in the rest of the country. You know, there will be some things where we could learn from the different situations where they will have some similarities. So how has it been going with regards to schools being reopened?
So good morning. It is, I think I was listening to your conversation before, and I think what is happening is the government seems to have forgotten that it is responsible for policy. And it is responsible for good policy. And good policy goes beyond, just policing or just health, but it also extends to education. And what we're seeing now is the fact that we again have not thought through the policies as it relates to education. Now in Tobago, we have a situation where, one of my colleagues went to school the first day, a week or two ago when they had the official opening. And there were teachers sitting in classrooms with one or two students. That was coupled with the fact that most of the students were at home and could not get online because the teachers were trying to figure out how they were supposed to teach in person in the classroom while teach online at the same time. Again, going back to the fact that we really had not thought this through at all. And this goes back even further. Remember, we started having this conversation about online classes and so forth last year. Yes. It's over a year now. And I think the way we have, and by we I mean the government, unfortunately, I have to put myself as part of that. The way they have thought about it is we just need to figure this out and survive COVID, instead of thinking about it in a manner that is closer to, we now need to get our classrooms and our school system up to scratch so that we can compete with the world. Because this is not just about getting a Zoom class so that we can recover from COVID. This is about ensuring that even after COVID, whenever that ends, because it seems to be never ending, we are able to have classrooms that are smart. Now, I went to school 10, 15 years ago, and the classrooms that I sat in at university back then were smart classrooms. What does that mean? There were cameras already pointing to the board. The board was an actual electronic device that you can project to, that you can write to. If we needed to print everything room to another space, the setup was already there to do that. And I think that that is where the government should have been thinking about this, not just the quick fix to figure out how we can get a couple devices to our students, because even that they have failed at doing, but how we could turn our classrooms to ensure that with a situation like this, with the very low vaccination rates, that we do not further disenfranchise our children. Because in essence, that is what is happening. I don't think they've recognized that by not having a proper education policy to ensure that the best of us, to ensure that the worst of us, to ensure that those of us with money, that those of us without money, to ensure that all of our children are educated is what is necessary to ensure that this island or this country becomes successful or continues to be successful. That has to be whether we have children or their parents or the teachers vaccinated or not. that is where we failed. We did not think about this holistically enough, and we are now reaping the benefits or the hard times as a result of it.
Well, that's a good point, because I wanted to bring up the fact that as much as the conversation is now about those being left behind between the vaccinated students who could come to class and the unvaccinated students who have to be online, I think we're somewhat forgetting the fact that the online situation, when it was all online, we already had students being left behind. So just saying that, well, we should go back to being all online, I think is somewhat of a bit lazy by some of the detractors, and it doesn't point to the issue that you're pointing to, that we need to have a proper policy on how these things should work, because we had that issue, as you pointed out, when we now started. Well, online classes. But the teachers, at least in the beginning, had to figure out what that meant and how to do it themselves. Now, put them in school with students in front of them, still having a classroom online. What are the policies to direct that? And I think, at least with regards to one of the questions, either the Minister of Education or the Prime Minister was asked, I think it was the Minister of Education. She was asked, what are the policies for a certain issue? And she didn't really have an answer. She didn't really have an answer to give. It was almost like if, we told you the policy, schools are reopening. That's it. That is the beginning and the end of the policy. That is the beginning and the end of the plan.
Yes, I was very surprised, because I also asked that question. If we are saying that we only have vaccinated children in the schools, then what exactly is the plan for managing this? Because there is no way you would expect the teacher, the single teacher, to be able to manage both. Is it that we are now grouping children so that you may be getting taught by one teacher, who that teacher is responsible for the ones online, while the other teacher is responsible for the ones in front of him or her? What are you asking the schools to do? Because the schools were really sitting, waiting. As a matter of fact, I've been to several PTA meetings for schools in my area. And one of the things you hear coming up is that, the parents or the teachers would ask the principal a question, and the principal would honestly not know, because the first time they heard about the issue, or the first time they heard about the policy, was on the news with the rest of us, and they now had to try to figure it out. Now, this requires, I think, and it relates to everything that we do, this requires a bit of brainstorming. Let me go back a little bit though. I think one of the reasons we have this problem, and I've said it on this program, I've said it on every program where I've spoken about COVID-19, and particularly COVID-19 vaccination, is that we've basically failed at our communication strategy as it relates to COVID-19. And we are seeing it amplified as it relates to COVID-19 vaccinations. People have real questions, and we have not answered those real questions. And in the space of a vacuum, incorrect information filled people's minds, filled people's hearts. So we now have to work even harder, double, triple time, to get out that incorrect information and put in the correct information. Now, having understand that, we should have known very, very earlier that saying that our children needed to be vaccinated to get to school would not have been enough to actually get children vaccinated. Full stop. We should have known this. So we should have known that we needed to have a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D for those children whose parents, because many of the kids probably want to, but the reality is their parents are in charge. And if their parents say no, we have to respect what the parents say. So we should have thought about that. One of the things I would recommend, for example, is that instead of trying to get everybody in or everybody out, we could probably say the students that we want to have face-to-face for whatever reason, the upper level, the forms 4 and 5, or the standards 4 and 5, because we need to have them face-to-face. Sure, let's bring out all of them face-to-face, but let's use the entire school so we are able to actually spread them out in a way to make it safe. And then the lower forms or the lower classes, have them be online so we know we are not trying to mix too many of them in the school setting or outside of the school setting. And that way we know that everyone is getting reached. Of course, we would still have to deal with those online, how to make sure that we get to them. But that is one way we would not be separating our children, again disenfranchising a significant group of our children who are going to be left behind, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just like to point out again that the stated reason, or one of the stated reasons, one of the reported reasons for bringing in the lower school or bringing out the lower school to face-to-face classes was that they had problems with online connectivity. And in my mind, I'm like, yes, on the bare surface of thoughts, that makes sense, because obviously if online is not working, then bring them out. But we know that they're not all going to come out. So you're still going to have a fraction, and probably a majority fraction, who are still online, and you're still going to have that problem anyway. So how does this really benefit? The other thing, and you more or less brought this up, what happens if we have a full classroom? How are you going to maintain social distances if all of the students came out? What would have been the plan if you were too successful? Similar to when we saw the long lines and the crowds when they said, well, you don't need an appointment anymore. The first time they said that, just go to the health center and get the vaccines. It's like when things actually work better than intended, it turns into a disaster. So what are the policies and plans? So I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else to say.
No, it really is. And I think it is, again, because we really need people to sit and brainstorm. It goes back to one of the statements I've been making as it relates to the COVID-19 management. We needed to actually have a group of people, not necessarily the ones who are doing the management, sit in think tanks. That is kind of what we needed to just have rooms of people, virtual rooms of people, throwing out ideas and working towards how can we make this work, because we need to make this work. That is, I think that is a way we needed to be thinking about this. And I think that for example, when I went to college, one of the things that I treasure one of my advisors during college days was because he would say to me sometimes, okay, Faith, we need to learn we need to do something. And if it was using a program that I was not familiar with, he would say, okay, that's not a problem. I'll give you the day. Go figure it out, go on and brainstorm, go read, go do whatever it is. But the reality is we need to do this. And I am giving you an opportunity to figure out an answer as to how we can do this. And that kind of brainstorming, I think, is what we have been missing for this entire COVID. And it is now showing in our education system. And I think we are simply not listening to the teachers as well. I think if we actually spent a little bit of time actually listening to the teachers, because they have some phenomenal ideas, right, we would not be in the position that we are in right now.
And I mean, so this goes back to our commentary on the matter with schools reopening this week. Because at least with regards to the union, we felt that they didn't really have a goal for what they were communicating. They just listed their bullet points of communication, essentially, or explained their bullet points and hoped that we would get the context. One of the things that was lost in the shuffle was what is the best for the children, how best to meet the needs of the children. Some of the issues the union were raising were labor disputes that had nothing to do with the kids, and I get that they're a union. So I think it's interesting that you say, to some extent, because when you see the papers that the government is not listening to stakeholders, right now that's mainly meaning the union, mainly. But what about the teachers who might have ideas? I mean, because not all teachers have failed at their job of trying to continue to teach during the pandemic. Many of them have been dedicated, devoted, and have worked hard to make up for the shortcomings of the situation they're in, whether by the pandemic or by the government. So I mean, you're right. We do need to find those teachers that are working hard to come up with solutions because they're the ones who are doing the job. Some of them would just do it naturally. They might not even realize to what extent they're going extra. Find these solutions and maybe see the good ideas and try to implement it wider.
And this goes back to using a quality management approach. Quality management basically says we look at what we're doing, look to see whether it's working. If it's not working, let's try something, but let us look at it again, measure it to see whether it's working. If we try it and it doesn't work, then here we switch. Let's try something else. But we have to do a very systematic kind of approach to looking at things, ensuring that it's working. If it's not working, there's no shame in saying, hey, we tried this and it didn't work, so we're trying something else. There is no shaming that. That is how we get to perfection, because that is where we need to get.
Our politicians aren't able to communicate on that level. For the most part, I haven't really seen it. And to your point of looking to see what doesn't work, I don't really get how you could have looked and seen how the rollout for the upper school was going and said, I know, now is the time to roll out the lower school as well. So, and the communication seems to be the opposite of what you're saying. Rather than admit to any issues, they're wanting to paint everything with rose-colored glasses.
Picture.
Exactly. And say, well, it's fine, it's fine. In fact, it's so fine, let's continue. And we didn't even warn you before that we were going to consider this so soon.
Exactly. And I think, it goes back to us not understanding that the future of this country relies on how well we manage this. We do not want a situation right now where we have an entire generation of children coming up haven't been educated. We are going to look back at this 20, 30, 50, 100 years and say, oh my God, how could you all have allowed this to happen? Mm-hmm. And if we take ego out of it, if we take, this idea that I must be right and I must always be right out of it, we would recognize that we needed to do this differently, not just for ourselves or our political parties, but we needed to do this differently for this nation. That is where I think we've fallen down.
So I just want to move on slightly from the issue with schools and now just talk more generally with regards to how has the vaccination rollout been going. I assume among students it's been quite slow, or it has at least slowed down. But then also, how has the safe zone rollout in Tobago? How has that been going?
Well, I am not even sure that we've had a rollout just yet. There are a few places, a lot of the places that I have passed by, for example, the benches are still stacked up on the tables. So really it's you come in and buy and you leave, whether you have your vaccination card or not. Because I think we really just haven't figured out how to do this well enough. Now the thing about these safe zones, what public health, what they don't understand is the concept of this safe zone would really only work once we get a certain percentage of people vaccinated. We cannot use safe zones as the reason to get people vaccinated. That's not good public health policy at all. We needed to get a certain percentage vaccinated, then use a safe zone to encourage the others to get over, to come over to that side. Again, it goes back to really, really not understanding good public health. And I am convinced though that there are actually public health professionals who are working on the team who are actually giving this kind of advice. But it goes back to, I'm sure, the politicians just not listening.
Well, consider this. Despite the Minister of Finance, again, trying to paint the situation in rose-colored glasses and essentially tooting his own horn, it has been my speculation, or the speculation of on this show, that the economy of the country can't really afford a lockdown and needs to open up. And since we can't open up fully, then this is probably the next best thing, the best compromise we could have at the time. And I have been telling people, look, you need to understand, it's not that the government necessarily wants to discriminate against you. It's that this is the only way they feel safe, because they don't want to take the risk of another spike. That's the thing. Politics says they can't lock down again. That might be a disaster. So this might be the only way they're willing to risk any kind of private reopening of certain sectors of the economy, like restaurants and cinemas. Do you think that's fair?
But even if that is the case, we can go back to good policy versus bad policy. We are talking about having restaurants or having places open, but only for vaccinated people. Some of these vaccinated people have children under the age of 12. Mm-hmm. What is happening with those children under the age of 12? Are you telling me that once I am going somewhere, I have to leave my child at home? You know, so let's, even if that is the case, even if you do want to have the safe zone, let's work it out so that it actually makes sense. Children, so let's just say, even if we're using the safe zone, children, as long as, you know, you do whatever your parents do, because you are still under the guidance and care of your parents. So if we are allowing your parents to go, then sure, you can go with your parents. Let's just put it like that. So again, it goes back to just not thinking critically about what the policy is and just leaving it on the wayside,
I mean, with regards to the messaging of vaccinations, I think you're right. We've said it multiple times over multiple issues. When you leave a void of information, you more or less will end up in a situation where you leave it up to the people you are not properly servicing to do themselves. And you can't necessarily be upset when they go in the direction you don't want them to go. So now, I mean, with regards to vaccination in Tobago, has it slowed down? Is there any hope that there's an uptick? Because I know just overall, the vaccination rates weekly are what the Minister of Health wanted it to be daily, not but a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is actually very, very slow here. I guess I am an eternal optimist. So I will always push to get, you know, that it can get better and it will get better. I have personally been doing a lot of work myself to get people the information, the accurate information. As a matter of fact, I get calls and messages every day. It's amazing. I get calls and messages every day with people just saying, Dr. Faith, I am scared. I am generally scared. I do not want to die. Tell me something to, to alleviate that fear so that I can go and get the vaccine. Those are the messages. Those are the conversations that I am having. You can't discredit that. You cannot discredit that. How do I combat that? I actually asked them, okay, can you tell me somebody who you know who actually got the vaccine and died, or got the vaccine and got very sick? And then you see them start thinking, well, I don't know anyone myself. I said, okay, can you tell me somebody who actually got COVID and died? And they could list, 2 or 3 people, because that is a reality. So again, it goes back to understanding what are people's real questions and real concerns and answering them. Because we don't just have a community of people who are just anti-vaxxers. That is not what we have. We have people with real questions, real concerns, and deep down, deeply seated fears. We have to learn how to combat that. And combating that is not screaming at them. Combating that is not having the press conferences. As a matter of fact, I would say it now. I can't tell the last day I've listened to one of those press conferences because it just ain't making sense. Yeah. As a professional, I cannot tell you the last time I have listened to one of them. So I know those people who are not public health professionals, not listening at all, which means whatever information that they may have picked up, that one snippet that they picked up 3 months ago is what they're still going on right now. We have to dig a little deeper and answer those actual real questions.
And I would say, just to add to that point, usually a lot of the really good information has been just a one-off appearance by outside doctor or experts who will give us, a fair amount, not necessarily everything, but a fair amount of good information, and then that person does not come back again for maybe months. Meanwhile, we have the usual show telling us more or less the usual things, some of which, yes, is important for the government to release on a regular basis, but communication style, it's if a public health person like yourself, that's your doctorate, that's your area of expertise. If you don't see the value in it, I mean, I feel less bad, let's put it that way, of also wondering, you know, okay, is there any value in continuing to watch these things? I mean, you do kind of just monitor it, but not to the same extent. But I just need to, well, actually, I had a final question, but it seems as though we're out of time. I don't want to put you on the spot and say 30 seconds, answer this. We could get into that later when we see you again next week. But as always, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate your perspective, both as a politician, but also as a public health professional on this ongoing situation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
All right, folks, you could catch Dr. Faith B. Israel and all of our contributors, but Dr. B. Israel is with us every Friday on Talking Point, where we'll get into issues on Tobago, but also at times more wide-ranging issues that are of national interest, as we did today. But we have to break for news on the hour on WESN Content Capital. When we come back, we'll open up the phone lines. This is Friday, last day of the week, last chance to get whatever you have to get off your chest. So call